Welcome to Season 2 of Next of Kin, the podcast. I'm your host Emma, a British expat who moved to Dubai to further my fashion career when a positive pregnancy test rocked my world. I was asked to choose between my career or my baby, so I realised I needed to pivot fast. And that's where Next of Kin came in. Last season you followed along as I muddled through my first year as a mum and started my first business. Now I have a toddler, a brand, and this podcast. So join me this season as I jump into my Mumpreneur era and try to figure out whether we can really have it all. I'm joined today by Amanda Ashworth. You may already know her by her Instagram handle @DubaiTravelMum. Her tagline on Instagram is empowering mums to embrace change and transformation. I mean, does that not just sum up what we're trying to do here with this podcast? How could I not ask her on for season 2? Throughout this episode, I'd like to find out exactly what that means for Amanda and how she helps other mums. But honestly, the content which I am so invested in following her for is her Worldschooling journey. So yes, not just homeschooling her 3 gorgeous children from primary age all the way up to an 18-year-old, but she travels the world with them whilst doing this, and also at the same time maintaining this life coaching career. Oh, and how I actually met Amanda to start with was because she launched her podcast, Finding You Now, pretty much the same week I launched this podcast. I'm sure it was Amanda actually who put me in touch with Lisa from Lullabies, and that episode you all absolutely loved, so thank you, Amanda, for that. But now let's find out more about Amanda herself. Amanda, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Can we just get started by you introducing yourself to the listeners?
So I'm Amanda Ashworth, also known as Dubai Travel Mum. I'm a life coach and a homeschool Worldschooling mum of 3.
And those are the 2 things that I'm super interested to dive into at the moment. Let's start with the Worldschooling, because I know we'll get into all the coaching and all the transformation work that you do with mums. But I just love your Worldschooling content on Instagram. Like, that's really what I follow along for, because I love it. And it's something that I have never even considered. So how did you come up with the decision to homeschool in the first place?
So I've been homeschooling now. This will be my 9th year. So I have a almost 16-year-old, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. And so I read the book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And it just really made me think about the parameters that we put on our lives, and maybe things could be different. And it just really, and the more I looked into it, the more I was like, okay, this is almost an itch I need to scratch. That, what's the worst that can happen? I can take him out for a term. Like, he liked school, he was doing okay in school, there was nothing wrong. But actually, when I took him out of school, I realized that there was a problem with his writing. And to start with, I was like, is he just a bit like, is he lazy? Is he like, is he just a boy? Is he, so many different things. And eventually I had him tested, and he had something called dysgraphia, which is he physically finds writing very difficult. And he was also gifted. And so the 2 were masking each other. School had never picked it up. And when I did speak to the school, and we were looking at potentially at one point about sending him back, they were like, all the additional work he's going to need to do, you're going to need to do with him at home. And they were going to keep him they were keeping him at break times to like almost punish him because he couldn't produce the output. But of course he was bored because he's gifted. Yeah. So like, okay, school is never, ever going to work. And prior to us starting to travel, I actually hadn't traveled very much. So about 20 years ago, I was a nanny. So I ended up being a holiday nanny for a few families. So I literally would just travel with them when they went abroad. And so we started taking trips. So, we did all sorts of trips, from a day trip to Denmark, where we took the first plane out and the last plane home, to just various. But obviously, when you're not restricted to school holidays, you have a lot more freedom, and it's a lot as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. So how did he react when you said you wanted to take him out of school to start with? Was he happy about it?
Yeah, he was willing to give it a go. So at that point, we were living in Cambridge. So Cambridge has a big homeschooling community. So, he still has friends now that he met when he came out of school. And so we were really lucky that what I would say with homeschooling, that there's too much to do. Even in Dubai, like we could be busy every minute of every day. So we get severe FOMO that we can't do everything, but Dubai traffic also contributes to that. So we do a mixture. We do a mixture between like homeschooling groups and extracurricular groups. So it's a real mix.
Okay. And when we use the term world schooling and homeschooling, can you explain to the listeners what world schooling means? What do you mean by that?
So with homeschooling, there's loads of different terms that are used. So quite often, you could almost recreate school in at home. So that would be structured homeschooling. And then you might have a religious approach to it. But then you might have unschooling, which is very child-led. And so your child decides what they learn and you really just facilitate that. And with the world schooling, it's that your children are learning by traveling and seeing the world. So, if you imagine there's subjects in school that can be taught, and it really depends on your teacher to whether or not they're interesting subjects like history and geography and art. That if they're taught in the right way, can be amazing subjects. But quite often when it's taught with a textbook, it can be very dry and not enjoyable. And so
so true.
Yeah. So our approach is that we want our children to be lifelong learners and we want them to love learning. So, what better way to learn about the Romans than to go to Italy or, learn about the Second World War that we went to. There's the Schindler's factory in Poland, and that was a really good way of learning about the Second World War. But then also you're learning about different food, different cultures, different religions, different languages. So we still do work, the basics, maths and English. But then I think the biggest misconception about homeschooling is that you're going to be your child's teacher. And what I say always is that I'm their project manager, that I just facilitate and fund what they want to do. But nobody knows their child more than the parent. So knows actually what that's the next stage is for your child and what they might be lacking in, what they might need, and just pushing them as well.
Yeah. It's interesting because, what you said about how the subject is taught, I find that my whole career is probably paved from the subjects I enjoyed at school, but it wasn't the subject, it was the lesson that I enjoyed. It was the teacher, it was the people that I was with that then I decided what GCSEs I was going to do because I found this a boring class, so I won't do that. I got a really good A-level in psychology, but I never thought once to do a degree in it because it was a bit of a boring lesson. I didn't like my teachers. I didn't like who I was in the class with. So that's really interesting that they're not going to have that kind of influence.
Yeah.
They're just purely doing what they're going down their own interests and those routes.
But that's not to say that we're not anti-education and we're not anti-schooling. So for example, we tried school here last year because I didn't want to feel like I was putting my own views on my children. So I wanted to give them the chance. And just because it hadn't worked for my eldest, but again, I found with my middle child, she's so confident normally. And actually she didn't talk for the first 2 terms, that she found being in a really big group really overwhelming. And I could instantly see where peer pressure comes in. So suddenly she wanted to have a haircut and her ears pierced and wear tights like the other girls. Yeah. And I think sometimes children need more time to come into their own. And that's what we could see. So, but, 2 of them have been to school in India. There's lots of alternative schools. There's lots of schools that will accept children for, a month or a term. And so you can dip in, we just choose to dip in and out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting that you don't have to just say I'm completely out. You can adapt. You can go to schools in different countries. So you're definitely not being the teacher all the time.
No, and so we have tutors as well. And again, like you said, it's really important that a child has a good teacher. So, for example, my son, he's a bit reluctant with English, and we found him an amazing English teacher who was able to, really facilitate and kind of pull it out of him of what he needed to do. He's done exams already, so he started doing his GCSEs 2 years early because, again, there's no restriction or requirement on when and how you do them. So you can actually spread them out and you don't need to do the full 10. Recently, we've switched over to the American system. So he's now doing dual credits. So he's studying for his bachelor's at the same time as now doing his high school diploma. So it's what I would say is the process isn't linear, that, there's not just one way of doing it.
Yeah, I really like that. I guess the one question that you must have all the time is around socialization, and people say school is for the socialization. What's your take on that?
Think about how many times you were told in school to be quiet, how many times you were told that, you're not there to talk, you're not there you're there to learn, you're not there to. So think about those pockets when children actually do socialize in school. And it's very forced socialization because you're only communicating with that group of people that are in your class, regardless of whether or not you like them or not. You're forced to socialize with them. Mm-hmm. So my children are with other children, so my middle child at the moment, she's at Forest School with a group of children, and my little one will be with her friends next to Forest School while she waits. My son does activities, again, with a mixture of homeschool and school children. So, the socialization is the thing that you don't need to worry about, because actually it happens, and it happens because they want it to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. What would you say are the actual cons then of homeschool versus traditional?
So the actual cons, it really requires a parent to be fully committed to it. So, that some parents do, both parents are involved and they dip in and out. It's almost like my career takes a backseat because actually, I've only got so many hours in the day. So, a pro and a con is that you spend lots of time with your children. There's days that, I'm quite happy to hand them over at the end of the day to my partner for him to do bedtime. But I would say that is the biggest con, is it does require one parent to be quite selfless.
Yeah, I could see that. But then there seem to be so many pros as well for you that maybe you didn't even expect when you started.
Yeah, well, I think obviously I feel so blessed that I get to spend so much time with my kids, that, I get to see those moments. I get to, that's the funnest part, is actually I do get to see them spend so much time with them. But I also get to see them learning. So this year, we started off the year doing quite a lot of work. And then actually now, because we've done most of the work that I wanted to get done, there's a lot more freedom. And actually, it's amazing to see how into writing my 6-year-old is. And so I don't get her to do it at all. She just does it. And it's like, Mummy, how do I spell this? Or how do I do this? And is this okay, Mummy? And so what you realise, and you must know this with your daughter, you don't teach them anything. They've got an inherent desire to learn. So, she learned to sit up, she learned to walk, she's learning to talk. You're around her, but actually that's all coming from her.
Yeah. Does it get harder as they get older and they're learning more complicated things? I mean, I remember in GCSE maths, they started doing algebra and Pythagoras, and I was like, I am out. So how would I ever teach that to someone else?
Well, as I say, there's so many online programs now. And if you look in schools as well, how early iPads are introduced, or computers as into school, that there is so many online programs to actually help them. But as I say, tutors as well. So science is not my strongest subject, but I can outsource, it's just a bit like in a business, you're going to outsource anything that you're not so good at. And because I would, especially for example, art, my daughters love art. I'm not the most patient person when it comes to like art a mess, and that I will do what I want to do and set up a scenario, and actually what I find is it's taken me longer to set up what we're doing than they're bored, whereas actually it being very child-led, they will actually do it. But we're going to India for a month next month, and they're going to have art lessons every day with an art teacher who they listen to. He is incredible, and to see what they produce, that's where I feel that my strengths are, of knowing what's going to be best for us. But for example, reading, I've been really successful in teaching my daughters how to read well. So
yeah, that must just be such amazing life experiences for them. How many countries have you been to in the last 12 months?
Oh, in the last 12 months, now you're making me think. Probably about 12. But we're going to do 15, I worked out, by June this year.
Wow.
So we do like to slow travel, because I feel like, slow travel is about spending about a month in a place, because firstly, it reduces the cost. Secondly, it allows for downtime as well. So if the children have a day that actually they just don't want to do anything, they can do that, and I don't have to go, okay, we've got to move on. The children are very much in charge as well of what we kind of vote as a family with what we want to do. So if they didn't want to travel, that we wouldn't be traveling. We've just come back from a cruise, and that was a new discovery as a family. And I was like, I can't believe we've not discovered this before. So what I'm realizing is cruising with children is the easiest way you could possibly travel with children. So I've just booked a second one. Also, because in Dubai you pay school fees, and quite a lot of parents then pay for tutoring on top of their school fees.
Yeah.
So when you think about that budget, I have 3 children. So that amount that we would spend in school, we just redivert that budget. So that gives me a nice amount of money to be able to travel with. So the idea is that we travel for about 6 months a year.
That was something I was going to ask you about, the costs involved. I mean, if you were comparing it to being back in the UK, then of course, if they were not paying fees at a school, then that's completely different. But here in Dubai, the fees are really quite high, aren't they? So I'm sure that you could even be saving quite a lot of money by homeschooling and still having tutors.
Yeah, so I think we pay probably only about 1 to 2 school fees. So, for example, my daughter's ages, the school fees would be around about 50,000 dirhams. So that's what, about $15,000. But at my son's age, there'd be about 100.
Yeah.
So, and then I think in Dubai, it's also the cost of groups. Extracurricular groups are so expensive. So, them having a private swimming lesson in Malaysia costs hugely different to them having private swimming lessons here. And so again, it's like finding something that they really love and being able to facilitate that. Obviously here as well, it's so hot for such a big chunk of the year. That we love being outside. And so I think we'd all get cabin fever if we had to stay here all year round.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that with a toddler. I'm really not looking forward to it.
No. We are very lucky that there's a lot of places that you can go. But I would say, yeah, so we save money when we're away. For example, I rent my car here, so my car goes back if I'm going away for it. So again, this is where you structure it so it works for you. So last year we had live in help. This year we don't, because it doesn't make sense to have somebody here when we're not here. Another downside is that obviously my partner can't always be with us, because although he works from home, he only has a certain amount of holiday, and but he's really supportive of the travel, and actually he quite likes being home as well.
Yeah. Okay, so it works well for your family.
Yeah, and I would say it's whatever works for somebody's family. So I've met lots of people that, they've spent quite a few years transitioning out of the 9 to 5. And so now they're both able to travel.
Yeah. So before we move on to your own career journey and what you're doing now, I actually saw a reel, I think it's a viral reel that you've probably seen as well, of some other podcasters discussing homeschooling. And the host says to them, but school is a representation of the real world. You need to go to school for the real world. Yeah. What would you say to that? Because I thought this completely changed my mind when I saw the answer to that.
Yeah, it's not a representation of the real world. If you look at how fast AI is. So if I look at, when my son was born, the iPod was first released. Look at how far the world has come since the iPod was released. I look at, how far online education has come. So my son can now do exams online because they're proctored, which makes it that he can do them from anywhere. That there isn't a one size fits all. But how many people hate what they do? How many people, dread Monday mornings? How many? So for me, life should be enjoyed because you have one life. You shouldn't wait to, retirement, because I know so many people that don't get to retirement that, this subscription that, you should go to school, then go to university, get married, buy a house, have children. That's fine if that's actually what you want to do. But if you don't, I've said this a lot of time, it would almost break my heart if my son got a job, because there are so many ways you can make money now. That I think he is likely to, because actually I think he would quite, the 9 to 5 and having that structure is what would suit him. But I want him to work to live rather than live to work. That I don't, how many of us, our jobs are a big part of our identity. And then how many of us actually get to our 30s and 40s and then we change what we're doing entirely.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm focusing this whole season 2 of the podcast on, because especially as a mum, you suddenly have a child and your whole world shifts, your whole perspective shifts. I was speaking to someone earlier who's trying to think about childcare options for when they go back to work, but they're currently pregnant. And I was like, it's really hard for you to think about that now, because you're going to feel completely different. Well, you're likely to feel completely different when that child arrives.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
for me, I probably wasn't as interested in that career route when I had to try and return to work for a bit. Well, that brings us nicely onto your career journey. So what is it that you do at the moment?
So I'm a life coach and a business coach. So primarily at the moment, I'm doing a lot of business coaching. So I come from very much an entrepreneurial background. So I've had my own businesses, and life coaching was something that I'd wanted to do, that I went on my own self-development journey with coaches that I had, and actually unlocking the almost people are their own keys to their success. And actually with a mindset change and understanding the way that your brain works, you can completely change your environment.
Yeah. So when did you start working with life coaches yourself?
So I started in lockdown. My journey probably started about 5 years ago. I was in India, and what I realized at that time is, I wouldn't say I'd struggle with mental health, but I definitely had lows, and where there were definitely points in my 20s and 30s that I was like, do you know what? I have on paper, I have everything that, is deemed successful, but actually I'm not very, it doesn't feel, I don't know what I imagined it would feel like, but I felt empty. And so I was like, this isn't what I want. And then when I was in India about 5 years ago, I'd been traveling with hand luggage. And so it was the least amount that I'd ever had, but it was the happiest I'd ever been. And I just realized up until that point, my relationship with myself had always been pretty toxic. And I think most women, our internal narrative is terrible. And it's a question that I ask a lot of my clients is, if your husband spoke to you the way you speak to yourself, would you still be married? And most of it is like, no. And so, so whether or not it was around my body and dieting, or just a level of kindness, I made a commitment at that point to change because, the longest relationship you're ever going to be in is the relationship you have with yourself. Do you really want it to be, a toxic prison? And so then in lockdown, it was the perfect time to do the work that I wanted to do. And I didn't even know what I wanted to do. And so I tried a few coaches, found one that worked, and then started to go through the process. And I think obviously as I've gone through the process, I've then, changed coaches. And then last year I decided to do a coaching course and move into that role myself.
I think what you've just said is going to resonate with a lot of women. Is that where you would suggest that they start to find a coach? How do you find a coach that works for you? Like, where
you can find so many, there's, coaches online. What I would say is you want to kind of establish. So I talk a lot about limiting beliefs, and most people aren't even aware that they have the limiting beliefs. So this internal narrative that people talk about, and the way that we sabotage ourselves because we don't believe that we're good enough. And so by actually going back and doing some of the healing and the inner child work can really aid you to then move on with your life and choose a life that you want.
Yeah. And I saw that just from your Instagram that you do mainly work with mums. Is that right? Or
I work with women, but primarily mums. So a lot of my clients now are people that are looking to start or grow their businesses. And so I use my business knowledge for that. But then the other half of my clients are women that they've maybe got school-age children. And especially in Dubai, where lots of women don't work, you become, a lot of my clients are very high performance, that they did really well at university, they got really good jobs. You have a child and your identity is completely lost, and you're like, okay, well, now what do I do? And men don't experience the guilt that women experience when it comes to managing work and children, and and also managing the mental load that, we take on so much. But so what I help women do is find their voice, because I find, especially women, we're taught to be people pleasers from such a young age, and to help them effectively communicate so they don't feel overwhelmed, but also working out what that next point is for them that they want to get to, so they're feeling satisfied as well.
Is it difficult as a coach to not put your own opinions over or give your own advice? Because it really has to come from them. They have to come up with the solutions, don't they?
Yeah. So business coaching and life coaching are completely different. So from a business coach perspective, I play devil's advocate a lot, or, we'll make could you consider this? But from a life coach perspective, you have all of the answers within you. So it's not for me to tell you how to live your life. It's for me to help ask the right questions, for you to go, oh, okay, this is what I want to do, and have those aha moments. Which, and I get frustrated, especially when I see some coaches online. So I'm living my true authentic life that makes me really happy, but that's not necessarily going to make the next person really happy. So I don't encourage people to see my life and go, oh, but what I hopefully show when I show things with my life, a lot of the feedback I get is, well, you're really brave. I really wish I could do that. And everybody's able to do whatever they want, but most people are stopping themselves.
I get a lot of comments like that just for the fact that I'd left my job and doing my own thing. So many mums that want to do that, and they just say, oh, but I couldn't do that. How do you get people to get past that feeling?
Well, that is down to limiting beliefs, and that is down to their own self-worth. And it's working out that, that there is the work that you can do, but then there's also going, actually, do you know what? If you just take a little bit of action day by day by day, you would be amazed. So I can see, like, with your journey, you did so much with a baby, but you've used your time wisely. And that's what I would say to any new mum, is while your children are young, you've got time to do, so whether or not it is to retrain or to learn something or to start a business or just start acquiring skills prior to that child going to school. Because what you don't want is your child to go to school and actually your self-worth is attached to them and they become your project. You want to have something where actually that's, and I find this with my partner. I sometimes say to him, but you will give a presentation and then get feedback. My feedback is from my children, which isn't always, they're not always the most grateful.
Yeah, they're not going to be the most constructive with that feedback.
No. And so, it's good. I think everyone needs to feel that they're good at something.
Yeah. It's something that we've been chatting about a lot recently, because the way I do it, I have to really just prioritize. So I don't want people to think that I just have it all. Like, I don't spend much time with friends. I don't have a lot of self-care at the moment because I really am either with Bonnie or business. So it's interesting that you say that about how you're using your time.
And I think everybody is just working out what sacrifices you're willing to make, because this is what it comes down to. So I started a business in lockdown, which went on to do very well. And I started it as an experiment, because what I was hearing from people around me is, in order to start a business, you needed money or an original idea or an audience or, a website. And I was just like, no, you just literally need to get started. And if you start and you're committed to yourself not to stop, you're going to get bumps in the road. I'm sure you've had it with suppliers or, the manufacturers, but that's all part of the journey. But by not giving up and committing to yourself, that I think a lot of people look for outs, because they, you have a negativity bias and they almost want to give themselves the evidence that actually they can't do it. But there's absolutely no reason why people can't.
I definitely still have that in my brain, but there is that level of commitment that even though you're thinking that today, you've still got to just keep powering on through and keep going for it.
And I think this is what the brilliant thing is about Dubai is an amazing place for showing you what is possible. That there are so many people doing so many incredible things that you wouldn't see in the UK, that, and everyone is so supportive. There's a real entrepreneurial spirit here, and people back each other. But, like you said about the self-doubt is always going to crop up. But if you also do the inner work, then you know how to tackle it. And just by continuing, you don't want to look back in 3 years' time and go, actually, that could have been me if I hadn't have given up.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to remember. Sometimes when I feel like I'm not getting anywhere, in a few years' time, would I regret just going, actually, no, I'm not going to do this? So you have to.
So I think there's a really important place for quitting as well. So, I left my business behind, but that was for the greater good of our family, and it wouldn't have been the same here. And so, obviously, as you grow and evolve, you're going to change. But there's that mindset of going, what happens if that next door you knock on, could be an international order into a department store, or, you're never going to know, but you're only going to know if you continue to try.
Yeah. Was it quite a strategic move for you then, going into the life coaching and knowing it's something that you could fit around your family and thinking, right, what can I do as a career? Or did it just come really slot into place?
So I have some online businesses as well. But they are very passive. So they don't require very much of my time. And when the children went into school last year, I've obviously been home educating for 7 years. We'd just moved to a new country. So I was like, do you know what? I probably need a bit of a break. And suddenly I had lots of time on my hands. And it's like, okay, now what do I want to do? Now it very much it fits around my lifestyle. So, for example, a lot of my clients now are in Canada and America, because if I'm in Asia, the children are asleep. I almost had to give myself a kind of check-in last year, because when we were traveling, I think I put too many expectations on myself. And so when I travel, because I'm on my own with the children a lot of the time, then, I rely on external childcare or, around the children. But it came down to what was my why, and they were my why. And so I was like, okay, I'm not doing this for the money. But if it's pulling me away from my children, actually, maybe I need to reassess my priorities. And so now I'm choosier about what I do. And so I only work with clients that I want to work or projects that I love. But that's the choice that I make.
Before we finish up, you just mentioned their passive income, and I'm trying to bust at the moment whether this is a complete myth, because if you go online, there's a lot of content focused towards the mums about do this for passive income. And to me, I'm just like, can you actually have passive income, or are you creating something that you then really need to continually work on marketing so it's not quite passive?
Okay, so one of my businesses is an Amazon publishing business. So I had some designers that worked for me on my e-commerce business, and it was beneficial to the business to have them full time. But I didn't necessarily need all of their hours. So it was like I looked at what I could do with their skill set. So I'm very data orientated, that I love looking at stats and analysing. And so even with my products in my e-commerce business were picked based on trend reports or, the data that supported it. So we decided to look at Amazon. So, for example, Amazon Publishing does this, but Amazon Merch also does this, where you will upload something to Amazon, and when there is an order, they will print it and send it to the customer and do all of the customer service. So from having an e-commerce business where I was finishing the product, packing the product, shipping the product, doing the customer service, I was like, this is so time intensive. Like, it just didn't. And then working out how you can scale it. So every month, Amazon pay me money for books, and as they have more reviews. So I do some of the marketing as in paid ads, but that's as far as it goes.
Okay.
So completely passive.
Amazing. Okay, so it does exist.
It does exist, but what I would say is it's not passive to start with.
Yes. Okay. So
as long as you take the approach that it's like a business to start with, and then once you've got it going, then it's a machine. You do need to oil it, but it's not as intensive as a business. So you could do passive income. You can do it with courses of something that like a skill that you could share. You could do it with so Amazon FBA, actually Amazon selling a product. But as I say, the work that you do to start with, it could be a holiday let business that, again, you then get a manager in to run. There's so many different forms of it. But I would say the misconception online is that it's easy, because initially it's not easy. But once you've kind of figured it out, it's good.
Because I think you'll already know, I looked into doing an online course at one point, and I got a little bit into doing it, and then I realized that that particular platform cost a lot. And I was like, well, how are people going to know to then go and purchase it and pay for this platform? So that's what made me get thinking and being like, right, lots of people are telling me to do courses, but how are they going to know to go and buy my course?
Well, obviously that's my marketing. So, and this would be the two things that they don't teach at school, would be sales and marketing. And sales and marketing are the key to any successful business. And, so online digital skills, which is if you're a new mum, they're skills if you don't have, the amount of mums that I come across that are, depending on what job they've done before, are quite scared of technology. But technology makes it so much easier. So whether or not it's, starting a newsletter, starting a blog, think of, friends, YouTube, there are so many different ways that you can earn money online. But it is, committing to, being realistic, going, okay, I'm going to give myself 12 to 18 months for this to be profitable. And even if nothing happens in that 12 to 18 months, if I just don't give up, what could happen?
Yeah. Yeah, being realistic about that time frame, I think, is quite important. I think that's why people give up, don't they? Because 3 or 4 months down the line, nothing's happened.
Yeah, and I think, it's working for yourself, especially when you have children, is a good way to find the work-life balance. Like, I wish in Dubai there were more part-time jobs for mums, because it would make it a lot easier. But as I say, rather than looking at it as a negative, look at it as an opportunity that your child, they're at home for the first 2 years, and I appreciate you might be tired, there's sicknesses, illnesses, but the amount that you can learn in 12 to 24 months is incredible. And it is about, depending on how you look at self-care, doing that education piece can be self-care in itself, because you're investing into yourself.
Yeah, I think I found that from doing the podcast. It's like a passion project for me. It's not really a big drain. It's something where I get a lot of value from myself.
Yeah. And what have you found the challenges of having, a Bonnie and managing a business in the first year?
It's that time, and it's the mum guilt. And I think I had a similar realization to you, because when I was launching the business, I just put everything, all my time into it. And I was even to her nanny being like, come on, you've got to take Bonnie, because I've got to do this. I've got to do all these different things. And then she was quite ill in December. And so I was forced to I really couldn't do any work. She was physically attached to me for pretty much a month. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this for her. So I need to design this to work around her. And I've just had a similar realization literally yesterday, because now her nanny has quit. So I was like, right, do I want to send her to nursery 5 days a week full time? No, it still doesn't really align with what I want to do there. Okay, so I need to reassess how this is working for me in the time that I have, so that I can still be really present with her. I know others do their business whilst their children are there playing. Bonnie's not into that at all. If I dare to open my laptop, she's not going to have it. So.
Yeah, and that really doesn't work for me, because I find, especially if I'm wanting to be creative, I need that like space, and the noise in my house doesn't really allow for it. And so it's setting out those times. But I also, so I'm a big believer in kind of working seasonally as well. So I think that we live in a world where we're always on the go, and we don't actually generally stop until we're sick, or feel really down. And actually, so assessing, going, okay, right, I'm going to do a sprint here. This is going to be, a period of time where I'm going to focus on work. I've got the infrastructure in place to actually support me. And then I'm going to take a period of rest for myself and for my family, because I think, you're probably very similar to me. I can get so fixated on something because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I want, it to look beautiful, but then I suffer. My self-care suffers. My children probably don't get the best of me, because again, I get quite snappy and impatient with them, but they're doing what they're meant to be doing. But actually, I'm not splitting my time in a way that is healthy for me.
Yeah. And it comes back to the limiting beliefs of having that belief that you have to be working really hard for a business to succeed, when actually you're doing enough. You're doing enough. You don't need to do any more. You're doing the right things. You've got your strategy in place. You just need to do that. But I'm definitely someone that feels like I need to be burning myself out to have it.
And I think this is where we've got it. And I think, there's been so much online over the last few years to do with being productive. And I think it's really toxic. And, you don't have to be doing something at every point of the day to be, what's productive for one person isn't productive for another. And, in the last couple of years, I've really prioritized sleep, because that's something that I didn't in the past. And just really listening to my body when my body is telling me to slow down. But, one of the things I look at with my business clients is actually what's what's in their agenda that they can strip out. And that's what I said to you about me being really data driven, because especially with creatives, lots of people want to create something that they think will sell or they love, but the data doesn't necessarily back that up. Whereas I will be like, okay, what is a profitable niche? How can I exploit this niche? And so sometimes, especially when you've got a new business, it's good to get an outsider's perspective on it, to actually make sure that you're working smarter, not harder. Yeah. And so sometimes I'm sure I do have clients of mine that will come on a call and they'll be buzzing. And then I'll have to be like, but actually, how is this, you're really busy, but how does this affect your bottom line? And sometimes, especially in Dubai, I have limited time, so I don't do very many coffee mornings, because, it's how you can be productive, get the most amount of your time.
Yeah. And there's so many different things that you feel like you should be pouring your resources into, whether it's paying someone to do this thing or spending your time here. Or I felt quite guilty for leaving one of the networking groups, but I didn't have the time. But the feedback I get online is that I need to be doing all of these things, but you're just one person at the end of the day.
So deliberately last summer, I took some time off of being online. So, I'm normally a huge multitasker. So if I'm at the gym, I'll be listening to a book or a podcast. There's very rarely that I'm just doing one thing. And last summer, I just cut out all of the noise and really started to tune into that internal narrative and what that was telling me to do, rather than what everybody online was telling me to do. Because and what I found is actually I don't get any resistance now, because I'm doing it the way I want to do it. And so, because I think sometimes people will go, well, and this is when you know yourself. And this is what I would say, lots of people don't know their kind of inner workings and, how to coach themselves, is knowing there's a difference between feeling unmotivated and lazy, and actually you don't want to do it. And that's where the resistance is coming, because actually it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel authentic. And so I think a lot of us, will do things and they will push yourself forward for something that actually doesn't feel right, and we don't trust our own intuition.
I might do similar. I might take that away from this podcast and give myself like a month of no outside influence, because I feel like if I'm scrolling, that I need to be taking in all the advice, that I should be doing this for my business, this for my business. I might just see what a month of passing that by does and where I go.
Oh, I think, it works absolute wonders, because the inspired action that you get, you will just do it and it will feel natural and it will come to you. Whereas, as I say, you're not meant to be, as a business owner, you wear so many hats. You're not meant, there's so much you can outsource as well. And learning, okay, is this really, what is my time worth? And is this really worth my time? And can someone else do it better than I can and get the job done for me?
Yeah. Amazing. Well, let's bring this to a close. Amanda, how can people work with you if they want to get in contact?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. I'm Dubai Travel Mum, or you can go via my website, which is amandaashworth.com.
Amazing. And they could work with you one-to-one coaching. You have an online course.
Yeah.
You have a podcast.
I have a podcast. Yeah. So there's multiple ways. And as I say, there's two arms to it. There's either the business coaching or the life coaching.
Great. Well, I've loved this conversation. I've got a lot out of it. I think I'm going to have to shoot you some personal questions after this.
No worries. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us for this episode. And yes, we did end up chatting away when we finished recording as well. And thank you guys for listening as always. Please do me a massive favour and share this podcast with any friends who you think would enjoy listening. And if you could rate, review and make sure that you're subscribed, that really does help me out. Follow me over on at nextofkin.ae on Instagram and also on TikTok. I'm going to try my hand at TikTok, I think. See you. Have a great week.